And we're happy to see all of you here. And I'm not at all surprised that everybody has come because they know it's going to be a wonderful program.
Before we get started, I'm Becky Hoke, and this is Betty Moorhead, my mother, who, with my father Lee, founded this program. This is our 31st season in Batavia. And today, this week's also kind of a special week because today is our wonderful videographer's birthday, Barb.
We couldn't do without her.
And we're so happy that BATV now posts these on YouTube so that you, because I know sometimes you don't live in Batavia or get the local cable channel to watch it. So now you can get them on YouTube. And then Sunday, my mom is turning 97. Anyway, so it's a special week, and I know we were so thrilled when Marnie wrote her first book and had her here, and now she's back with another one. And we have a Wisconsin ties. My parents lived up there for many years, and I think she is the gem of the Wisconsin Historical Society. And so I'm just gonna turn it over to Marnie to come tell you all about her newest book and maybe share a little bit about her last one.
So much. We're glad you're all here to enjoy it.
Well, thank you so much all for coming. Wow, what a wonderful turnout. It's just fabulous to see so many wonderful friends and friendly faces in the crowd. It means the world to me. I'm so honored. And I really want to thank Betty so much, and Becky and Barb and Stacy, the Batavia Public Library and the Batavia Library Board for offering this wonderful series and inviting me to come. So I'm grateful. And I don't think we can really start though. We have two, really, Barb's birthday and Betty's coming up. So let's warm up our voices and sing to them. So happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday dear Betty Barb, happy birthday to you. Harmony, I love it. So I thought, can everybody hear me okay? Good back there? I love, every time I'm looking, I'm seeing somebody just fabulous. So I thought I'd give you a little overview of where we're headed, so you get kind of the game plan for the afternoon. This is so special for me to be in the Batavia Public Library because I used to teach here back in the 1970s. It was my first job, and I see some familiar faces. Mike Stiers and Gertrude are here, and my room was room 30 at the top of the going upstairs, and I looked over in the northeast corner there, over the river in the town. It couldn't have been a more joyous or happy place to begin my teaching career. And so when I started to write both these books, On a Clear Night and Return to Wake Robin, I often would come to this beautiful library and park myself up in that same space and did a lot of writing and editing and thinking up there. So it's a beautiful facility, and I've been doing a lot of book talks around Wisconsin and in Illinois too at a variety of libraries, and I have to tell you, this is absolutely the best one that I have ever been to. So we thank you all for coming and for the library support. So I thought I'd give you a little bit about my writing experience and how about On a Clear Night, read you a couple essays, and then I'd love to hear your questions and comments. And we've got some books here if you need gifts for Christmas or Thanksgiving. The little sales pitch, of course, always has to get tied in. So again, thank you for coming. And you know, one of the first questions that an author is asked, well, what's your book about? And it's always kind of hard to summarize that up. But On a Clear Night, Essays from the Heartland is about those seemingly ordinary moments that over time or through reflection transcend into the profound, to the extraordinary. So whether it's just a lighthearted moment like teaching a teenager to drive and going too fast on the road and you're yelling stop, stop, or something more heart-rending like the need to put an aging parent who's physically declining but mentally sharp into a nursing home, or perhaps something just more reflective. Maybe an adult child or a good friend has moved across country and out of your life, and that changes that dynamics and it puts a little hole there. So those are kind of the simple, ordinary stories, but really that's what is the web that makes up our life. And just like on a clear night, when we get to look at the stars when they're out, those are the stories that connect us. They're the stories that have universal emotions that we all experience, and we tell them to each other. We tell them to our family members, to our friends, to our neighbors, and in doing so, we get to understand each other a little bit better, understand ourselves a little bit more, and feel that we're not quite alone. So I'm hoping too that these stories within the pages of On a Clear Night will ring true to you in some way, whether you've lived them or experienced them or know somebody who has, and maybe they'll remind you of your own special moment that left an indelible handprint upon your heart. So come on with me, we'll hop on the Starlight Express and kind of delve into the background of how this came to be. So a lot of people have commented on the cover, and I'm very, very lucky to be published with the Wisconsin Historical Society Press. They published my first book on a return to Wake Robin, One Cabin in the Heyday of Northwoods Resorts. And they've, they're a small academic press, but they're very powerful and mighty. They've been publishing nonstop since 1855. And so they put out about 12 titles a year, and I've been very lucky to be a part of that press. Wonderful editors to work with. And they designed this cover. This is taken by a professional Wisconsin photographer, Matthew Cawley. Kind of sounds like Downton Abbey to me. I like that connection. And it's right before dawn. So if you have ever been in the Northwoods or any place far north to see you can still see the Milky Way. The stars are still there. It's like you're sitting on a dock waiting for a shooting star. And I think those stars, the whole essence of that, the metaphor of past, present, and future, how the stars connect us is a wonderful design that that they incorporated. And for you artists out there, the title is a hand-drawn font. So that kind of added a nice artistic whimsy to it. One of the second half of the title, Essays from the Heartland, it's interesting as a writer, once you start looking back at what you wrote, how different themes and places and people seem to keep resurfacing. So for me, one of the major themes is the power of place. And that power of place is right here in the Midwest. And On a Clear Night particularly is mainly centered right here in Batavia, and also a good section of it back up to the Northwoods. So it's interesting, the Midwest is only 12 states, only makes up 12 states of the country. And it's often called the flyover zone. But for those of us who are here, another name for it is the breadbasket, which is a little bit nicer. But for those of us who live here, I think heartland is really what describes it best. How many of you are lifelong Midwesterners? Oh my gosh, look at that, see? So we know how many of you are newbies? Fairly new? Not too many, we're all pretty rooted here, so that's wonderful. And I think we know, even though some people call it the flyover zone, many people think the East Coast is more, and West Coast are more trendy, more hip, whatever. But we know in the heartland here that this is a wonderful place to live and work and share community with one another, just like we're doing right now. So what I'd like to do is start off right off the bat by taking you down, the story of that favorite film of mine is A Wonderful Life. And you know how Clarence is up there in the cosmos, in the stars in the heavens, and he gets the directive to come down to Earth. So, and help George Bailey out in Bradford Falls. So that's what I want us to kind of delve down here. We're not going to fly over. We're going to delve down here into the Midwest, right here in Batavia. And what's going on here? What are we thinking? What are we feeling? What is our history? What is our connection to one another? And I hope these stories spark that for yourselves and your own memories as well. So this first essay I'm going to read to you is called Marching Away, and I think it's just iconic Batavia. And how many of you have been to the homecoming parade in March? How many have marched in the homecoming parade? Who knows who's led the homecoming parade? Raise your hand, Mr. Heath. All right. So it is just so Midwest, so Heartland, so the beauty of we have both band directors here, Mike Stires and John Heath, that have led a myriad, like Pied Pipers, a myriad of children through these streets and across the bridge and over the hill. And that seems like a very, simple, ordinary moment. But for me, with my 3 sons in the band, growing up in Batavia, it was really a powerful moment. I read this summer on NPR on WNIJ out of Northern Illinois University, and Dan Klefsted was the host. And I warned him, I said, this is one he asked me to read, actually. And this is also the one that my editors at Wisconsin Historical Society Press chose as the first essay to go into the book. That was their lead. So I think it speaks a lot about Batavia, really, and what we cherish here. So I warned Dan when I read it on air, and I wasn't successful, that it doesn't seem like you would get emotional, but for some reason you go back, and there you are in that moment. So I was standing, when I'm describing this, a little backstory, I was standing over here on Wilson, on the main street, because the band come down from the high school, and I'm on by the Lutheran Church, right across the corner from what was then the library. So here we go. Maybe you were standing there with me. The day has a perfect pitch to it. Warm autumn light filters through treetops, backdrop by brilliant blue sky. Along Main Street, the distant rattles of drums and tuning horns are accented by a cacophony of conversation and laughter. Today is the annual high school homecoming parade. All is about to begin. Waiting for the shrill blast of the police siren to start the parade, I stand on a curb and watch the others gathered for the afternoon's festivities. Proud parents, local business people escaping from work, grandparents in lawn chairs, and young mothers surrounded by small children line the parade route in eager anticipation. "When's it going to start, Mama?" my 5-year-old son asks impatiently. "Soon," I reply. "Here, let's see how many red leaves we can find while we wait." My 2-year-old joins the search while the baby watches his brothers intently from his stroller. I watch my 3 sons' sweet faces alight with eagerness. In a few short moments, the football team will be rolling by in hay wagon chariots, tossing candy as they go. Shining red fire engines will blast their sirens, and elaborate crepe paper floats filled with waving teenagers will cruise past. Most fun of all will be the thrilling sound of the band. Colorful uniforms, flashy instruments, and joyful music will march toward us in one big mass. "I hear them," my oldest shouts. "Here they come," his little brother yells. Squealing with laughter, they lean over the precipice of their street corner curb for a better look. Even the baby strains his little face to the sound of the approaching music. In the distance, we hear the first snappy sounds of a Sousa beat. Muffled at first, the clear notes of the trumpets, steady cadence of the drums, and brash power of the trombones begin to emerge. All of a sudden, the band is upon us. Leaping back to the safety of our curb, we watch as a blur of color and harmony sweeps by. Clear clarinets, high-pitched piccolos, and booming tubas pepper their notes into the air. Sailing by in their synchronized steps, the musicians flow steadily forward, sending their music aloft to dance in the autumn breeze. We clap and clap with excitement. Then, just as suddenly as they appeared, they are gone. We watch with some sadness as they march on down the street, wishing the brief moment of their music could have lasted a little longer. "12 years later, the day has a perfect pitch to it again. Warm autumn light filters through treetops, backdrop by a brilliant blue sky. Today is the annual homecoming parade. The shrill blast of a siren rakes me from my reverie. The parade is starting. Today, I stand alone on the corner. I check my video camera to make sure all is set. In the distance, I can hear the muffled sound of mingling instruments and drums. My heart begins to beat with excitement. Waving red and gold flags suddenly appear, mirage-like, on the street's horizon. The notes of a familiar Sousa march begin to emerge. Here comes the band! Through the twirling flags, I spot the crisp white uniform of the senior drum major, my oldest son. Head held high, marching with smooth precision, he leads the band confidently down the street. Spotting me on the sidelines, he smiles brightly. I wave back, trying to hold the camera steady, but too soon, he has passed. Quickly, I search for my middle son playing the trumpet in the fast clip of moving lines. Don't let me miss him, I pray, as they march steadily along. There he is, smack dab in the middle of the band, concentrating on the trumpet melody. He struts his freshman independence by wearing his golf uniform to show that musicians can be athletes too. My camera lens catches him briefly as his line files by. Spinning around, I see my youngest son's middle school band approaching. I dash across the street for a better angle, just in time to catch him in the center of the front row. Music memorized, cavalier hat at a jaunty angle, his eyes twinkling, he proudly plies the slide of his trombone for the first time in a parade. For a second, he passes before the camera lens, before he too moves out of view. Not wanting the moment to end, I run clumsily down the street, video camera in hand, dodging spectators while trying to get around another glimpse of them in their striding grace. But the marchers move too fast, and I cannot catch up. Finally, I stop and catch my breath on a hilltop street corner. The flowing current of red-coated musicians marches down the hill towards the sparkling water that meanders through our town. The late afternoon sun flashes against their brassy instruments. Standing still, I listen as the echoing pulse of the band's song drifts sweetly away from me. It is magical, this youthful music, full of promise and hope. It fills the afternoon air with energy and beauty. The pull to follow is strong, but I hold back and let them go. In the dreamlike haze of the warm autumn light, I turn and head home, the gentle cadence of their music fading to a whisper. Thank you very much. I hope that brought some memories back for you too. There's nothing like the band, and so we salute John Heath and Mike Stires for being such long time. So another common question is how did you become a writer? And my journey was really kind of serendipitous. I wish I could say that I started out, longing to be a writer or knew I'd be a writer when I grew up, but that my journey took a little bit longer. I was not the spring chicken when I became the writer. And I think I became a writer, though really when I look back, because I love to read. And my first memories are a lot of Aurora, who's here from Aurora? I've got a lot of nice Aurora friends here. And maybe you will remember that you could hop on the bus for 10 cents, and we did that when we were by ourselves, 9, 10 years old, and go down to the Aurora Public Library. And on the second floor, the floor maybe still was glass, kind of a smoky glass floor, and you could go between those aisles of books, and with this the floor was lit underneath, and it was just like a magical kingdom to be in that and pick out books that you wanted to read. And so that was really mesmerizing and enchanted, really. And I also remember I went to Freeman Grade School, and the bookmobile would come by. Who remembers the bookmobile? It was on a trailer. It was just like a castle parked there in the summertime once a week. And you went in, and there was that smoky, dusty smell of the books in the library, and you stamped your card, and it was heaven to have another good book to read for the summer. And I think the third thing that I loved was, some of you remember the weekly reader that came, you teachers remember that. And you could order books, came maybe once at the back of that, so I would borrow coins from my mother's purse and put them in an envelope and mail off and get my little stash of books in the mail. And oh my gosh, it was like getting a treasure chest. And I think all those influenced me, and I love to read. I wasn't really thinking about being a writer at that time, because in my day, going on into a career, most of us of our age, the women had not yet broken that glass ceiling. And so we were pretty much in the realm of career-wise, secretary, nurse, or teacher. So how many of you are secretary, nurse, or teacher? Women out there, right? A lot. So there you have it. So, and I loved being a teacher because I wanted to share that love of reading and writing with my students. And I was very fortunate to teach here at Batavia Junior High, San Mateo, and a host of wonderful colleagues, and then again at Batavia High School later on. So I love teaching, and when my boys were, I left the junior high, raised my 3 sons for a while, and during that time period I said, well, I'm going to test the waters with some writing and see what I can do. And I like to, as you can tell, I like to tell true stories, nonfiction, creative nonfiction. So I had an opportunity to do some freelance writing with the Chicago Tribune. Another writer friend, Bob Habes, kind of opened the door to that and got us in touch with some editors. And so I started to write feature stories for the Tribune, and those are human interest stories, and I love doing that. You go around and interview a lot of people, and some of those stories were, for example, in the Midwest, you'd be surprised how many mountain climbers live here in the Midwest. They call themselves flatlanders, and they climb the highest peaks in the world, the Himalayas, Mount Everest, but they live here in the Midwest. This is their base. So that was kind of fascinating. Another I did focused on trends, and one trend that was popular at the time for grade school children was to go on field trips to the symphony to hear about classical music. So that was fascinating to interview the teachers, the students, the musicians, and what was going on there. And I loved writing those stories, but I loved interviewing the people, but I began to think about what some of these stories that were kind of pulling at me. And I had not written an essay before, but I thought there was a story that was pulling to me, and that was the story of getting up to see the sunrise on our Northwoods Lake in northern Wisconsin, where we've had a little cabin since 1929. And that, I'd not really written a personal essay before. I wasn't quite sure how to do it, but I thought, I'm just going to write the stories, I feel it and think it. And so my mother used to get us up, this would be in the 1950s and 60s, up to see the sunrise in like 5 in the morning. It was freezing cold, it was dark, and we hated it. And then we got down there, and again, a simple moment like that turned into the profound, and all my siblings and I cherish that memory. And then I did the same, of course, with my own children and their cousins a generation later. They're growing up in the 80s, and woke them up to see this is the sunrise that we saw. And so I wrote that essay, and luckily it was published by the Detroit Free Press Sunday magazine with a lovely colored illustration to go with it. And so I thought, well, and then it kind of took on a life of its own. It went on to Reader's Digest and Chicken Soup for the Soul, and became a teaching tool for the state of Maryland's education department, and eventually landed in my first book as the lead essay, Return to Wake Robin, One Cabin in the Heyday of Northwoods Resorts. And so that's the lead essay in that book. And this book, for those of you who are not familiar with it, is the story of our family's cabin in the resort next door from the 1920s to the 1960s, when camps were camps and cabins were cabins, and all you needed were the basics and the boat. And so that was published in 2012. Goes back almost to 1912. I'm really dating myself. And books between Betty Moorhead and Becky so kindly invited me here for that presentation. So and I'll come back to that in just a second, but I started to write more essays, and I was encouraged. So I started to write more essays, and they started to appear in the Chicago Tribune and Reader's Digest and Christian Science Monitor, and I love doing that, and they were just kind of scattered around all over. And in the meantime, I had gone back to teaching. My boys were in college, and but my mother moved back from Ohio in fairly poor health, and I needed to be her more of her healthcare manager. And so I decided to take a leap of faith, and I left teaching and decided to try for a book and to see what would happen. And so I've been working on Return to Waygroundland for years. Stop, because you're teaching, you're taking care of family, you're seeing friends, and lo and behold, it was being reviewed by the Wisconsin Historical Society Press in 2010. And my mother at that point was in a nursing home, which is one of the, actually this is my mother here on the cover, Woody Oatman. And my father took that picture in 1946 after World War II. And he's come back from the European theater in the Army, and they sought some peace and solace in the North Woods, and he snapped that picture of her. So I read the manuscript to my mother in the nursing home, kind of chapter a day sort of thing, and we laughed and cried, and she was a great editor that affirmed that, yes, this I was remembering correctly, and the stories were as she remembered it as well. And she died in June of 2010, and in August of 2010, the Wisconsin Historical Society accepted my manuscript for publication and chose that picture. It was in the manuscript to be on the cover. So it's kind of a sweet irony that that came to be. So in the meantime, once that got launched and started going, I began to think about, well, what am I going to do with all these essays that I've been writing kind of sporadically throughout the years? Would they possibly make a book? And so again, I approached the Wisconsin Historical Society Press, and they were very interested. Up until recently, they have focused mainly on Wisconsin, but then they're looking at history more, and also they had not done a memoir. This is considered a memoir. Had not done memoirs before, but they decided to expand and realized that personal stories are a kind of the history of what's going on, what we're thinking, what we were doing in a close-up snapshot. So they have since then added more memoirs to their list. And then I came along again 5 years later with a manuscript that was a collection of essays, and they really hadn't done too much of that either, but they thankfully loved it and wanted to go forward with it, and so the collection of essays was published as On a Clear Night, Essays from the Heartland. So, interesting enough, when, and this is one of their publicity shots. Isn't that just great? I love that. You can see why they're so much fun to work with. And this is at Madison, UW grads here. We got some UW Madison grads. I know we've got some kids who've been there. This is on the Union patio overlooking the lake there, and I just love that. You couldn't ask for a better snapshot than that. So my editor, interesting, these essays began to fall into themes. It was kind of fascinating to see how they fell into themes. And so the first section is on OU, so that's pretty about raising my three sons, and it's probably more than they ever wanted you to know about their lives, but it's out there and they haven't killed me yet, so the last part's good. And there's an essay there about, that was in the Chicago Tribune magazine, about waiting up for a teenager to come home who's missed his curfew. He's 18, he's a senior. It was a swing singer's night, and he's usually, had a midnight-ish curfew. So when he wasn't home at 2 in the morning, it was one of those moments when you are either going to ground him for life, or you're going to, call the police, or go find him in your nightgown. That was one option too. So anyway, he came home safe and sound, but that one of the, maybe you've had that experience, or maybe you've been that person who's caused that experience. So, and another section that turned into was Forever Friends, and I have to tell you, that summarized it right here. It's a lot about the importance of friendships and how they matter in your life and how they influence you. And I'm looking out at all of you today and just think what a part so many of you have played in my life. And one of my favorite stories in there is called Comfort and Joy, and it's about my dear friend Nancy Lee Sayers, who many of you knew was a wonderful teacher in Batavia, who passed away in 1998, and her friends. There's a beautiful bench right out here in her honor, given by her friends here at the Batavia Public Library. So the importance of friends is just amazing, and living as most of us have in the Midwest, we're lucky to have those long-term friendships that have been so much part of our lives. Another section is called Learning Curves, and that's really kind of about my struggle with technology. This is my first, if you can believe this, PowerPoint presentation. I had to have my son help me set it up, but I thought it might be kind of fun to have some photos here. So far, all is going well, but you know, when your newfangled, technologically improved car breaks down on a winter road and you're trying to find the wrench and the jack and and it's nowhere to be found, believe me. It's under the car and I don't know, behind, you just can't believe where it's hidden. So those are kind of my struggles with technology and learning curves, and I'm going to come to back that one in my second essay that I read you. Another section is called Grateful Hearts, and that section is a little bit more serious, more about finding good in difficult situations. And two of the most difficult stories for me to write were in that section. And one is called Christmas Rose, and it's the story of my father's struggle with alcoholism. And we loved our father over the moon. He was a wonderful, wonderful father, and but he struggled with alcoholism, and it affected our family financially and emotionally. And but in that essay, it takes place on Christmas Eve, I tried to find, was looking for the compassion and understanding and forgiveness that many of us who've been in alcoholic families are searching for. And I think that hopefully that story, it's hard to put that much personal information on it, make yourself very vulnerable, but I wrote it with love, and with love of my father. And I know many families have struggled with alcoholism, that they discover that's what is the tie that is never broken, is that love. And the other one was In Search of a Silver Lining, which was, as I mentioned, having to put my mother in a nursing home, and she was mentally very sharp, could quote Shakespeare and play a fast hand of bridge, and still wore lipstick and pearls, but physically was legally blind and in a wheelchair, and searching for that silver lining. So that was those were hard essays, but I'm glad I wrote them because I think so many other people can identify with them. And the last section is Under the Milky Way, and that is it's a lot about nature and how the impact of nature, particularly, a lot of stories go back up to the North Woods in this last section. And it's a lot about how nature influences us. And there's a story about a lunar eclipse here a number of years back. And just look at the solar eclipse, how many of you came to the library to the solar eclipse program that was here, downtown Batavia, and some of you went different parts of the country to see it. And so what a huge impact that nature has on us, and how important it is in our lives. And two of my favorite essays are in there. One is called Willie the Wolf and Other Wildlife, and it's about being up at the cabin and spending several weeks there in the summer, 1950s and 60s, when you would hear the wolves howl and that beautiful sound of their music. And then the second essay is called Listening for Wolves, because in that time frame of 50 years, the wolves were eradicated. They were shot for a number of reasons, and they had a bounty on them, and so they disappeared. Well, in the last decade or more, they've returned, and so those essays are about listening for those wolves. And my sister and my sister-in-law and I, you can go up in the North Woods or other parts of the country too, where wolves are, and you can go out with a naturalist or a biologist, and where the wolves roam, and the wolf packs are known to be, and the botanist, the naturalist will have you, or biologist will have you call for the wolves. So it goes something like this if you're going to call for a wolf. Ooh. Now, two sisters and a sister-in-law in the woods howling like that, I tell you, it's some pretty weird women. But one wolf sound is not enough, so I need howl with me. Ooh. All right. People howling at Batavia Public Library is even weirder, so that's better. I got you with me. But one of my other stories about howling for the wolves is, one night I was out on the lake kayaking. I was alone. It was misty. It was kind of foggy, and I thought, well, I was over in this kind of wetland area, and I thought, oh, I knew the wolves used to be there, and I thought, I'll just howl for the wolf. So I did my wolf howl, and I'm padding quite along. Well, all of a sudden the mist parted, and there was a fishing boat with 3 men in them. And they saw me, I saw them, and they started their motor and were out of there fast. I don't know what the Wisconsin Historical Society is going to say when they heard I howled, but there you go. So, and of course, you can't have a story about the Midwest without those lovable losers that are World Series winners now. So when you're waiting for the Cubs to win, what better opportunity to Ron Santo would be walking around at a Cub game. This was at Mesa Spring Training, and would let you interview, him and ask questions. What a great guy! I'm so glad he was in the Hall of Fame, and I had that little moment. So those are lots of Midwest moments. So eat your heart out, East and West Coast, right? So I'd like to conclude by reading this last essay on learning curves, and it's called, and then I'd love to hear your questions and comments. So this is called Sailing Away. So here I am on this lake on my little boat. It looks like it's a beautiful, quiet day. You're out for fun, relaxing, and who would think that you'd run into the law? So I'll tell you how. So here we go. Sailing away. I broke the law. Of course, I did not do it on purpose, but as any law officer will attest, ignorance of the law is no excuse. I was not speeding. I was not illegally parked. I did not run a tow. I was simply sailing. Sailing? Who gets a ticket while sailing? As luck would have it, I do. As the old song goes, I was sailing along on Moonlight Bay. Well, not exactly. It was a beautiful afternoon on the 4th of July in northern Wisconsin as I waited my family's arrival at our cabin. All was ready for our expected crew of 12. Fishing boat in water, food in the fridge, beds made. Why don't you go relax and go for a sail? My husband suggested. See, it is really his fault. Yeah, he'd tell you I've been saying that for years. I hadn't been sailing yet that summer, and gazing out at the blue lake and the blowing wind, I thought, why not? My sailboat is small, perfect for one or an occasional passenger perched near the bow. I have been a sailor since I was 12 years old, and few things give me more pleasure than heading out onto the water in my little boat to test my wits against the wind. There is only the soft sound of water rushing against the hull and the beautiful backdrop of the forested lake offering peaceful solitude, unless, of course, you're about to be stopped by a warden. I had just accomplished a hard tack against the wind to get out of our bay and into more open water when I noticed a powerful fishing boat approaching at slow speed. Sometimes other sailors on the lake will approach to compare sailing notes, so I offer a friendly wave and a smile. The man at the wheel waved back. He seemed odd that he was tailing me so closely, but I assumed he was interested in my boat. He was. And as the boat pulled up, I realized that he was a steely, short-haired woman packing a pistol and wearing a bulletproof vest. I was in trouble. "Hello," she shouted over the wind. "Hello," I shouted back, wondering what was up. "Do you have a valid sailboat registration with you?" she asked. "No," I answered honestly. Sailboats don't need registrations. Only motorized boats do. "Sailboats do if they are over 12 feet, she replied. "Mine's not over 12 feet, I countered. "It says 1400 right on the side," she answered. "That must be the model number," I blustered. "No, it means you have a 14-foot boat, so I need to write you a citation." "Can't you just give me a warning?" I pleaded. "No," she answered. "I must be consistent." Even though I was in moving water, I knew I was stuck. "How much is the ticket?" I asked, bracing myself. $186, she replied. I just about toppled out of my boat. $186? Was she kidding? I looked at her pistol and decided, probably not. During this whole conversation, I was struggling to control my sail against a blowing breeze by heading into the wind and letting my sail go slack. It's not exactly like stepping on the brakes or pulling the car over to the side of the road, but apparently a sailor's wind was not a warden's worry. With about 30 feet of water between us, she shouted out her questions. Name, address, age. I miserably shouted my answers back, ducking the wildly flapping boom like a middle-aged woman practicing hip-hop out in the middle of the lake. For a moment, I thought about pretending my boat was out of control and just sailing away, but I figured she'd tailgate me until I ran aground. I also thought about capsizing as a diversion, but I sensed she'd probably hand me the ticket while I was treading water next to my half-submerged boat. Thankfully, my common sense prevailed, for I'd heard of this warden's reputation. Newspaper accounts reported that she had once hidden in the woods for 48 hours in an effort to entrap out-of-season hunters. You didn't mess with this badge number. Finally, she cruised up on my port side, handing me the ticket and actually pointing a finger at the boating regulation book for me to see as proof. As luck would have it, my sailing ropes wrapped around her boat cleats, tangling our vessels up tighter than a fish on a bar hook. Capsizing the warden would have been the last thing I needed. At last, I was set free, both literally and figuratively, and with my ticket tucked into the bottom of my swimsuit, an appropriate place if there ever was one. I cruised home, the wind, as they say, out of my sails. My husband and I immediately measured my boat upon return. 13 feet 8 inches, guilty as charged. Several weeks later, to my further chagrin, an embarrassing newspaper account appeared. There's misery in company, however, and over half of the newspaper page was devoted to Department of Natural Resources violations, with a great many offenders coming from Illinois. It seems we Illinoisans keep the Wisconsin tills full, not only with our tourism, but also with our negligence. But I felt better when I read about the guy who got a $148.20 fine for failing to cover a battery in a boat. The fisherman who was nailed $248.60 for keeping a 13.5-inch bass, apparently a smidge too short. And the dude who got socked for $160.80 for overloading a pontoon with 18 people, only 2 of whom were under 100 pounds. Was there a scale? And how did the powers that he arrive at those odd numbers and cents amounts? Obviously, the law exists for the protection of the lakes, the wildlife, and the people. And those big fines will make most of us pay more closer attention. My check's in the mail, and the registration is ordered. Mea culpa. But as I scanned the columns for my crime, a lucky surprise greeted me. My tricky last name was botched beyond recognition. Thank you, Sister Wind. At least that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Thank you so very, very much. I'd love to hear your questions or memories of the Midwest, or maybe if you've read it, an essay that you liked, I can give you a little backstory if I can. So, anybody have a thought, question? Oh, here we go, Ann. Mm-hmm.
Did you always take notes, like make a journal or something?
Well, I start. A couple of my writing friends are here in the crowd. I'm not a good journal taker. I find it takes too much of my energy, and then I never get around to writing the story. So I do like to take notes, though, and I have those little notebooks that you get at $1 at the drugstore. And I do like to start out handwriting and taking notes and writing down thoughts or smells or impressions or feelings, how was I feeling at that time, or why was this pulling at me? Why did I want to write that? And then I'll go to the computer and do many, many drafts before I feel like it's finished. Yeah. So, how about another? Yeah, Betty.
I had 2 things. I grew up on Lake Geneva as a child, and we had a small lane which was gravel, 5 houses and 17 kids. No TV until I was in college. Was there a TV up there? And what we did, the last of the generation above me passed away. We got everybody together, so with grandchildren, it was about 100 people. We had a church service right on the lake, and one of the women wrote a paragraph on each person that had passed away as far back as we could remember. We had hot air balloons, and from your family, you had a pinwheel. And mid the service, we went to Johnson, and we went up and put the pinwheel for each person that had passed away. It was so moving, and I have all those paragraphs that was written.
Beautiful, what a beautiful memory. This is Bert Johnson's daughter, who, remember Bert Johnson? Who was,
Right.
And your father, and then when you lived in Aurora, your grandfather was
Oh, my father-in-law.
your father-in-law was the doctor at,
St. Charles
St.
Hospital.
Charles
He was the
Hospital.
head physician
Yeah.
there.
so.
So I have
A lot of Midwestern history, and I love that story about what a great celebration for
Oh,
family.
it was beautiful. It was hard not to cry. And we had a lot. I was wondering, is that still going on with families going to the lake and boating and building, those memories?
I think so. I think a lot of people love to gather at the lake, and we have family here in a place in Michigan that we love to gather. And how many of you go to a lake house or a resort or have done so in the past? I know lots of you have. And that's such a blessing to be able to share that time together and have a gathering place, I think, and to create those memories and traditions is a gift. Yeah, it's a wonderful gift. Any other questions?
Marnie, how's your writing? I guess, how many hours a day do you write? Do you set aside a certain amount of time to dedicate your mind to that, or is it just when you feel the need?
That would be the right approach, I think, to be more disciplined and to have a set schedule. And I so admire writers that do that. But I am not one of them, and I kind of write more as the muse speaks to me. And but I do feel that you accomplish more, you move faster if you write at a regular pace. But I think when I'm not writing, because I'm not disciplined like that, I'm always thinking of something. There's something in my head that's going on, and so I like to think of that time as also creative time that is feeding my writing mind and moving towards a story or an idea.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I have another question. Do you have another project started or in mind?
I do, and I'm actually I'm still writing some essays, and I've kind of switched gears a little bit to try some fiction, and that certainly is challenging, and that is I have found. I'm about halfway through, of course I taught middle school, and I love that age group, so it's a middle school novel up in the North Woods, surprise, surprise, back in the 1950s and 60s, surprise, surprise. But I have about 40,000 words into it, and so I feel like I'm at the point now I have to keep going. But that discipline of I'm finding you need to write more regularly, because otherwise you forget where you were and who your characters were and what they were doing. But I'm really enjoying that, and so I hope, stay tuned, I hope that maybe we'll complete it, yeah, and it'll get out there. Yeah. How about?
Is Wake Robin still there?
It is still there, and it's in great shape. It still does not have a TV, there's no internet, it does have a phone. We did get a phone. It's shared by my siblings and myself, and my husband and I bought a little retirement cabin across the lake because we've gotten big with grandchildren. So it's so wonderful to have my sister from Virginia comes with her family, and my sister from Quincy, and my brother from Oregon was there this summer, and my brother from Madison. So we use it all summer long, and it's still just a treasure, and we keep it just the same way it is. We love it that way. Other people might walk in and say, gosh, this is not very modernized, but we love that atmosphere.
I have not read your Wake. Tell us how it got its name.
Oh, okay. So if we could find that slide, Dave. So return to Wake Robin. Wake Robin is for you.
Lake Robin?
Wake Robin. Mm-hmm. Wake Robin.
Wake Robin.
Return to Wake Robin. Wake Robin, for your gardeners out there, is the common name for trillium, which is a beautiful white three-pronged flower that blooms in the spring, particularly in Michigan and the North Woods, and it carps the forest floor. And my grandmother, who built the cabin in 1929 with my grandfather Earl Oatman, who were the owners of Oatman Dairy in Aurora, she designed the cabin, and it was just a little, it just has a little kitchen we call it a two-butt kitchen because that's all that fits in it, and a little skylight that my grandmother put in because those cabins can be dark. 2 little bedrooms, a little living room with a fieldstone fireplace, which is the only source of heat, and a porch, little screened-in porch with a sleeping nook in the back that overlooks the lake. And so we've been returning for how many years is that now? Since 1929. So all those decades and decades and decades, my grandchildren are the 5th generation, and we've kept it pretty much just as is, just 3 seasons still, and but it's filled with a lot of laughter and love and sharing, sharing. So another question, yeah.
It's not so much a question, but my favorite, if you'd speak just a little bit about it, is the part in Return to Wake Robin where you're traveling from where you live in Illinois, back when there weren't a lot of big highways and all that, and how you loaded down your, I don't think I ever laughed so hard. I was just,
well, that
how
was,
you improvised seatbelts that your father
yes.
made or something.
You have a very good memory, thank you. That is one of my favorites too. Maybe, I'm sure a lot of you have that experience of where we're 7 of us, 5 kids and 2 adults in a 1959 station wagon, traveling 450 miles from Aurora, we grew up in Aurora, to Hayward, Wisconsin. And there was no interstate at that time, no air conditioning in the car. We were going up for about a 2-3 week stay. I said, at those times you took your vacations, you had a 2-week vacation. And you took those 2 weeks and then you saved up and you came back next year. So we didn't stay for the whole summer back when we were young. And my dad was working, so we wanted to, of course, be home with him. So we would usually go for about a 2-week stay, and maybe we would repeat that later in the summer. But we had a canoe on top. Our grandmother giving us a canoe. The back of the car station was stuffed with, you can imagine what 5 kids would stuff in there, and we had bags of juicy fruit and, important things like that. plus fishing rods and shoes and pillows and sheets and towels, because there's no washer and dryer at the little cabin, Wake Robin. And we always got a flat tire. Always got a flat tire. And so then you had to take the canoe off the top of the car. And my dad was an Eagle Scout at Troop 3 in Aurora, one of the oldest troops in the nation. And so he knew how to tie those scout knots. And believe me, they were tied on so tight that you could not get that canoe off. You had to take it off, because that's the only way you get the back end of the station wagon open to get the tire out, and then you had to unload all the stuff in the back of the truck to get the tire. And of course, we always started late in the day because my mother had to clean the house before we went away, just in case we were killed in a car crash. Nobody would find a messy house with 7 people and 5 kids in it, and at our end. So it was always an adventure. It takes us now on interstate. It takes us about 7 hours, and that's still driving hard, eating your lunch in the car, and going, just right a little more than the speed limit. And then, but back then, it was, 8 to 12 hours, I would have to say. 8 hours would have been a really, really good day, but that was unlikely. And so we left late because we had to clean the house. We'd get there at 1 or 2 in the morning, and it was pitch black because you're in the woods. There's no lights on. So my father would have to put the fuses have a flashlight and put the fuses in the fuse box, turn on the lights. But it's an adventure that we just loved and cherished, and so that's the ongoing journey is in the book. Return to Wake Robin is in there. Yeah.
Were you up around Green Bay at all?
More northwest, other than the northwest part of the state. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Same.
We used to go to Green Bay.
Would you be willing to share how you celebrated your last big milestone?
Oh, the big milestone. And I almost put that picture in. Sammy, since you brought it up, when I turned 65, which was a couple years ago, I was at the lake, and I decided, I don't know if you can find that lake picture of the sunset. They made the sunset, because I decided that I didn't want a big party or anything like that. You know, you're a senior citizen, you got your Social Security and Medicare, you got a new driver's license, you know, I just thought that's enough. I'm celebrating, those are all milestones. So I decided to swim. I decided I wanted to swim out to an island in the lake. Now, this is not the island, but it'll give you kind of an idea. So with Dave as my trusty rower in a little rowboat, I just at spur of the moment said I'm going to swim to the island out in the middle of the lake. And that would be kind of a celebration that I wasn't really growing old. So I'm not a long distance swimmer, I'm a strong swimmer. And I have my, years ago, got my life-saving instructor, and I had my, at U of I, my PE credit was swimming instructor, so I could be a camp counselor on a lake in Wisconsin. So I have all that training, but I'm not long distance at all. And I don't wear a wetsuit or flippers or goggles, or I pinned my hair at the top of my head, found an old suit, and started to swim out to the island. Well, you have to think about weeds and muskies and stuff like that, so that was enough of a challenge. But I got out in the middle of the lake, and I actually was feeling pretty good. I couldn't believe that I had gotten that far, and I looked down the lake, and down at this end of the lake was Wake Robin, our family cabin. And I decided I was going to try to make that. So I told Dave, he's rowing patiently along, he should have brought a beer and thrown in a line, because that's how fast I was going. He's drifting, basically. But I made it, I kept swimming. It took me an hour and a half, but I made it down. I swam across this whole 750-acre lake and made it down to that Wake Robin dock. And I said, just metaphorically, it was such an transformative experience that to know that aging doesn't matter. It's how you look at life and how you feel and the friends that you have. And it was very transformative and really let me sail into my senior golden years, swim into my senior golden years with a new vision, with a new look. So it was good. And then,
Was Hayward close to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan?
It's on the opposite side. So if this is Wisconsin, here's Michigan over here on this side, and then Hayward's way up next to Minnesota. It's just short of a little bit south of Duluth, so it's very north. And Lake Superior, Bayfield, it's just like about 90 minutes from Bayfield, just south of Bayfield. So it's very, very north, and it's a long drive, but it's beautiful when you get there. So, any other questions? Yeah.
I have a question. How do you pick and choose what you want to write about? I mean, I just think of the day I sat down with my grandmother. My dad would be 100 this year if he was still with us. She told me, she said, well, relatives were out on the West Coast, and I got mad at your grandfather, and your dad was 10, so we took off with the Model T for California. And a whole chapter, and I could tell the end, what were the roads like then, Grandma? And didn't you cool off at the Mississippi?
I think when you start to write those memories and you start to try to capture those memories, that when you think, I wonder if I'll remember these details, I wonder if I'll think about them. But actually, I think when you start to write them down, they kind of trigger more memories, and you begin to remember, and maybe you have somebody still living at the time that you can verify or share memories with. And so I think the key is to start writing and see where it goes, because you'd be surprised. It probably is going to end up not where you thought it was going to, but you'll learn something and gain something along that journey, which is part of the joy of writing, I think. Any other questions? I want to just conclude with saying again that how grateful that I am to be here, and what a joy it's been. I've been doing a lot of book talks with Wisconsin Historical Society Press, and this is absolutely one of the best venues. I've spoken at a little tiny log cabin in Cable, that dates to the 1920s in Cable, Wisconsin. I've spoken to a homeless book club in Madison, which was a wonderful experience, and I've spoken to a historical society in Three Rivers, Wisconsin, that had a wonderful crowd, and I thought, gosh, isn't this great? Till I realized they were serving free beer and wine. And that was